If you've ever written any serious JavaScript, you know you have to deal with asynchronous stuff. Fetching data, waiting for a user to click something, reading a file. And if you've done that, chances are you've fallen into a nasty trap, a deep, nested pyramid of code. Today, we're climbing out of that pyramid using one of JavaScript's most powerful features, promises.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the problem itself, what we all lovingly call callback hell. Then we'll introduce the hero of our story, the promise. We'll unpack its superpower, which is chaining, see how that evolves into modern async await syntax, and then we'll wrap up with the core philosophy that makes it all so darn reliable. Let's get right into it.
All right, first things first, let's talk about the pain point. Before promises were really a thing, trying to handle a few asynchronous steps in a row would lead to this notoriously messy code structure. You might have heard it called the Pyramid of Doom.
Does this look familiar to you? That constant march to the right, with a function nested inside another function, which is nested inside another function. Yeah, it's a rite of passage for many developers, and it's a huge red flag that your code is getting really hard to read, debug, and just maintain in general.
And this right here, this is the perfect picture of callback hell. Each block depends on the one before it, creating this weird, unstable tower of code. And notice the error handling. You have to repeat that failure callback at every single level. It makes the code incredibly fragile and, honestly, just a nightmare to follow.
So, how do we get out of this mess? We need a better way to think about a value that we don't have yet, and that's exactly what a promise is. It's a pledge, a guarantee that you'll get a result, eventually. At its core, a promise is really just an object. It's a placeholder for a value that's coming in the future. Think of it like a receipt you get for an online order. You don't have the package yet, but you have the receipt, a promise that it's on its way. That promise can be pending, fulfilled when the package arrives, or rejected if something went wrong. It's this object we'll work with instead of those endless nested callbacks.
And here's the difference in a nutshell. I mean, just look at it. On the left, you've got that tangled chaos of the callback pyramid. On the right is the promise-based approach, a clean, flat, linear chain of operations. It's doing the exact same thing, but the difference in readability is just night and day.
So, how do we get from that tangled mess to that clean, straight line of code? The real magic of promises is the ability to chain operations together, one after the other, using a method called .then. This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of it. This is the secret sauce. Every single time you call .then, you get back a brand new promise. This new promise doesn't just represent the original operation, it represents the completion of your .then callback too. And that's what lets us build the chain.
Let's just walk through the flow real quick. An operation gives you a promise. You attach a .then to it with a callback function. Once that first promise resolves, your callback runs. Now here's the crucial part. That .then call itself returns a new promise, and the next .then in your chain just patiently waits for that new promise to finish. This is how the sequence stays perfectly in order.
Okay, here's a pro tip for a really common mistake. If the code inside your .then also does something asynchronous that returns a promise, you must remember to return it. If you forget, you've basically broken the chain. The next .then won't wait for your inner promise to finish, it'll just fire immediately. We call this a floating promise, and it can lead to some really unpredictable bugs.
And this shows another huge win for promises, error handling. On the left, with callbacks, you see how you have to handle potential errors at every single step. It's so repetitive, but with promises, an error anywhere in that chain will just travel all the way down until it finds a single .catch handler at the end. It's like a safety net for the entire sequence. One handler to rule them all. It's just so much cleaner.
But the story doesn't end with .then and .catching. The incredible foundation laid by promises actually allowed for an even more intuitive way to write our asynchronous code.
Now, it's really important to understand that async await isn't a replacement for promises. It's what we call syntactic sugar. It's just a new, cleaner syntax built directly on top of the promised engine. It lets you write asynchronous code that looks and feels like it's synchronous, pausing execution in a non-blocking way until a promise is resolved.
This comparison really says it all. The promise chain on the left is a massive improvement over callbacks, for sure. But the async await version on the right, it's just so much more intuitive. Instead of chaining .then calls, you just await the result and assign it to a variable, like you would with any normal code. And errors are handled with a standard try-catch block. The logic is identical, but the code reads like a simple top-to-bottom story.
So let's wrap this up by getting to the fundamental philosophy.
Why are promises so reliable? Well, it all comes down to a set of core guarantees they make about when and how your code is actually going to run.
These guarantees are the bedrock of what makes promises so trustworthy. First, your callbacks will never run synchronously. This prevents all sorts of tricky race conditions. Second, you can attach a .then handler even after a promise has already finished, and your callback is still guaranteed to run. And finally, everything executes in the order it was added. This predictability is what makes promises so much better than the old ambiguous callback patterns.
So how do promises actually pull off this predictability? They use a special micro-task queue. You can think of it as a high-priority to-do list for the JavaScript engine. As soon as your main script is done running, the engine immediately processes everything in this queue before it does anything else, like rendering updates to the screen. This makes sure your async logic runs as soon as possible, but always in a predictable, orderly fashion.
So we've gone from the tangled pyramid of doom to the clean, linear flow of .then chains, all the way to the simple, synchronous feel of await. Promises fundamentally change JavaScript for the better. They give us a solid, predictable foundation for handling the messy, asynchronous nature of the web. The only question left is, what will you build with them?